Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for the Cradle, and I'm joined, as usual, by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. So today we have to start in Syria, where things are continuing to develop in a very interesting way, although not at all unexpected. The most recent development is Ahmed al-Sharaa, the former Abu Mohammad al-Julani wanted terrorist, well, not so wanted anymore after the U.S. lifted the bounty off his head, announcing that it may take up to 4 years to hold elections in Syria, right? It might take, he says, he gave an interview to Al Arabiya over the weekend in which he says writing the constitution, a new constitution for Syria, might take about 3 years, and then organizing elections may take 4 years. And this as he has formed a so-called transitional government, right? That, well, there's not really any evidence of who gave them the power to be, in control of the country for now until, I guess, 4 years from now. And he's been surrounding himself by the same officials that he had in Idlib, right? He ruled Idlib for several years with an iron fist, more often than not imposing Sharia law. And now the same people that he had in high positions in Idlib are his foreign minister, his defense minister. There's reports that he has promoted several foreign jihadist, Salafi extremists to positions in the new army, to the ranks of lieutenant colonel, to the ranks of general, etc. So is this what we all expected from the beginning for Sharaa to shed his democratic skin in this little, Hugo Boss Armani fall collection look trim beard that he has now, saying all the right things, meeting with all of the Western envoys, and just to turn at the end and say, no, but actually I'm going to be here in de facto power for the next 4 or so years.
Well, I mean, don't forget that when the government of Bashar al-Assad fell on, I think, 8th of December.
7 and 8, yeah.
Yeah, Sharaa announced the establishment of a caretaker government that would last for 3 months. Okay?
Yeah, March was the deadline.
Yeah, he specified for 3 months. And it's not like he's saying that there won't be another interim government or transitional government. But how are they going to arrive at that? Are they going to, exclude the ministers that he's put in place, the cabinet that he's put in place? What is that going to look like? I mean, if none of that happens, it will be like basically he stacked the deck, right? That these are the cabinet, his cabinet appointees, and anyone else who comes in will, maybe do the technocratic side of government, running basic services like that, right? But the security apparatus, the intelligence minister was just named last week, foreign ministers in place, waxing poetic about Ukraine becoming a new pivotal ally for the Syrian state.
He received the Ukrainian foreign minister this morning, just before we started recording.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just the Ukrainian was just effusive about how we can help you identify Russian war crimes. It was Russia that basically propped up Assad, very much something on the Ukrainian agenda, right? To vilify the Russians and to corner them in as many theaters as they can. And of course, let's not forget that it was Ukrainians who provided the drones, that extra special weapon that helped these Al-Qaeda fanatics in their operation, right, to take over Syria. So, this is going to be a very important ally, I think, for the new Syrian administration. Whatever they can't get from others, what they can't get from the US and UK and Europe officially, they can get siphoned through the Ukrainian black market of arms, right? Which we've already seen. We've already seen Ukrainian arms turn up in Syria and Idlib and other extremist held territories throughout, since the Russian special military operation began. So that's going to be, Ukraine's just going to be like whatever they need. the Ukrainian black market is where they're going to get it from. So, I mean, that's a really telling sign about geopolitically the direction of the Julani government, essentially. But again, like you said, he's putting elections off for 4 years, and his reasons, ostensibly, for that is we require a comprehensive population census before we hold elections. But I mean, to some extent, I understand that because there have been so many displaced in the war. But most of that was settled after 2017, 2018, that may change if 3 million Syrians come back from Turkey, another million come back from Lebanon, and others from Iraq and Jordan, but not significantly. They still have their documents, and you can use your documents as one does in other elections to show where it gets stamped. Your official document gets stamped to show that you voted in this election. And so it'd be interesting to see how his Western allies, and let's just get straight to the point. The US and the UK absolutely fronting the rehabilitation of Abu Mohammad al-Julani. So it'd be interesting to see what these so-called democratic countries with liberal values will have to say about elections that are put off for that long, because that was one of their basic criticisms of the Assad government. No democracy, no real elections. And then rewriting a constitution. Remember that couple podcasts ago, I sent you guys the Syrian constitution. I'm like, let's look at this and let's see what could be different. They're not that hard to write. The language is basically there. There's nothing Assad related or, about the Syrian constitution. If they want to have a different procedure where there's not a president, et cetera, okay, that's fine. But you can copy and paste these things from a lot of constitutions. Why would it take 3 years? Unless they want, guys, here's what I think. I think right now, as our correspondent in Syria has been telling us, that you can literally go anywhere in Syria and there's no security forces on the street. Nobody protecting anything. And Julani needs the time to build up a military force that can basically ensure whatever he decrees is what happens. If people moved against him, if Syrians moved against him right now and said, just protests, peaceful protests in every single city in the country saying, no, we want elections sooner than that, he couldn't push that tide away. But give him 3 years and he will have consolidated an army of mercenaries. And guys, you have something to say, I think, about what the army is starting to look like, what the Syrian army is starting to look like, right? A bunch of non-Syrians getting high-ranking positions. What have we learned about that?
Yeah, so currently in the news, there's 3 names are being circulated, and none of them are Syrians, and they were appointed head of security and head of the new Syrian army. One of them name is Abu Hussein, and he's Jordanian, and one is called
Abu Hussein al-Ordoni.
Al-Ordani,
Okay.
yeah. Al-Ordani
Yeah.
means Jordanian.
Jordanian.
Abu Mohammad, and he's from Turkestan.
Al-Turkestani.
Yeah. His nickname is Al-Turkestani. And we have Mukhtar Al-Turki, and they are all have currently a high rank. One is Jordanian, as we said, one is Chinese, and Uyghur Chinese, and one is from Turkmenistan. So these are the names that we know. And of course, the logic says that Julani wants people surrounding him that he trusts, and the people who he trusts and who followed him since the beginning are Syrians and non-Syrians. And we know from since 2011 that many people came from all over the world to fight the Syrian army, and these are a few of them. And it's expected also.
Yeah.
And we have to know that last week he said that any residents that are in Syria more than 5 years, he will give them the Syrian ID. And these are, I think that's the reason why he said that.
The new governor of Damascus, just a couple of days ago, he gave us an interview and he says, we don't have any problems with Israel. Our problem is not with Israel. First of all,
Yeah.
Implying that there is a problem with someone else, wink, wink, they mean Iran.
Yeah.
Israel, not an issue for them. They are taking their territory, they're stealing their land, they're evicting people. But no, we don't have a problem with that. And just to close up on the conversation about the foreigners, because Rudo this morning had an article, and they mentioned, everyone, Karim mentioned, they also mentioned Tajikistani who became colonel, an Albanian who became colonel, an Egyptian who became colonel, and another Jordanian who also became colonel. So all of a sudden, the high command of the new Syrian army is just a bunch of foreign jihadis. And I think it's worth really mentioning that these people didn't go to Syria, to build a liberal democracy with with rights and acceptance for all. This is not why they went to Syria. They went to Syria for the complete opposite of that, which is, ISIS Caliphate in general. We have an article coming out this week that details exactly what we're about to discuss. And one of the most striking figures from this investigation that one of our writers conducted is that Israel has violated in the span of a month the ceasefire about 1,000 times. So I don't even think we can call this a ceasefire anymore, right? If it's a one-sided affair, how can it even be referred to as a ceasefire? Hezbollah has maintained that they will respect the terms agreed upon by the Lebanese state for the 60 days. But Israel, well, first of all, violating it as much as they have, and now also talking about this 60-day deadline, not as not as something for them to withdraw eventually, but for Hezbollah to be moved back from the Litani River. So they are, as we speak, not just violating this agreement, but also changing the terms, changing what was agreed upon to better suit them, to better benefit them. There have been many still people getting killed in the south, more destruction since this agreement was put into place, more houses destroyed than during the actual war, because now they're targeting, they're planting bombs. They are just going berserk, really, in the south of Lebanon. So, I don't know. I will leave it there and so up for discussion.
So, we've all been hearing this for the last month, that Israel is using this as an opportunity to go into areas that it couldn't reach at all during the actual, sort of more intensive 2 months of fighting. Was it 2 months between Hezbollah and
It was a year and a
Israel?
month, but then the actual, ground invasion was about 2 months, about 7 weeks.
So, the question on everyone's mind is, what the hell is this international committee that is ostensibly, set up to safeguard the ceasefire
Who are the
agreement?
members of this committee, by the way?
Well, the Americans, the main ones. The Americans will be running the show.
It's just the U.S. and France, right? There's no one else involved.
No,
U.S., France, and the Lebanese army.
And but there is another committee that is of foreign, like the UN and other foreign states as well. But so what we learned in this article that will come out next week is, we wanted to know what the committee was doing. So we learned that 2 meetings were held in Nakura, in the southernmost part of Lebanon, at UNIFIL headquarters, in the presence of Israeli officers. The first meeting was like 40 minutes long. Israel is violating the ceasefire every day and killing Lebanese citizens and killing Lebanese army soldiers.
They're still flying drones and planes over Beirut, right?
Correct. Every aspect of the ceasefire has been violated by the Israelis on a daily basis. But that first meeting was 40 minutes long. 40 minutes long, okay?
Shorter than this podcast.
Exactly. The second meeting went badly, okay? The Israeli side did not abide on what was, with what was agreed upon. The Lebanese army had made a deployment plan in the western, central, and eastern axes of south of Litani River, and this monitoring committee was supposed to coordinate a joint plan for that stuff and for the withdrawal of the Israeli army, so the Lebanese army could enter to implement its obligations under the ceasefire plan. But the Israeli army refused to present their withdrawal plan. And then, moreover, the Israeli armies blamed the Lebanese army for, the Israeli side blamed the Lebanese army for the slow deployment, for its tasks under the ceasefire agreement, which basically the Lebanese army cannot fulfill because Israel keeps shooting into these areas or rolling into these areas.
They
Okay.
even shoot once the Lebanese army has already entered. That has happened a few times.
Exactly. And according to the sources that the Cradle has in this article, the Israeli side not only held the Lebanese army responsible for the slowness of its deployment, but hinted that the 60-day deadline is not a binding deadline for the withdrawal of its soldiers. Now the 60-day deadlines narrative is being shifted, always shifting the goalposts. It's rather, in the Israeli mind, a deadline for Hezbollah to leave the south of the Litani River. And if Hezbollah does not do that, the Israeli army will forcibly expel it. So war on again. The article also, confirms what we were talking about, I think, in previous podcasts, that it was the Israelis who asked for the ceasefire.
Yes.
They were getting nowhere. They were getting slaughtered in the south and unable to move more than a few meters here and then withdrawing back, and so they basically used the ceasefire to do everything they wanted in the south, okay, with no pushback. And now pushing the goalposts further. Now, we're going to stay because you're not, Hezbollah is going to come back, etc. One of the things we understood was that Hezbollah is not a signatory to this agreement, but it said to the Lebanese side, we will uphold this for you throughout the 60 days, okay? And you need to then make sure this happens. If it doesn't happen, okay, all bets are off. And they're giving the Lebanese government, as I've noted before, not formally said, but they're giving the Lebanese government an opportunity to see that they cannot stop the aggression of their southern neighbor. This is an unhinged beast that will do whatever it wants, that will violate its sovereignty, and Lebanon needs the resistance to ward off Israel. This is just for Hezbollah's own constituents to see. It's for other Lebanese to see. Here you had, the other side of Lebanon who thinks, absolutely trusts the Americans wave the American flag and the French flag, for that matter, to see that their great allies, their great white hopes, will come up short. Okay, so this 60 days is that period. The article also says, however, Hezbollah concludes that when the opportunities are exhausted, there will be no solution other than resistance. I don't know if I should hang my hat on that one sentence in the article, but this is a distinct possibility. And not as in Hezbollah launching war on Israel, because Israel's never stopped its war in Lebanon, but a Hezbollah retaliation, serious retaliation, can begin at the end of 60 days. Interesting in the article, and I think we had heard of this before, but for our viewers who perhaps don't know the story, is that the Americans initially did not want the French to participate in this monitoring committee, but later allowed it because the Speaker of Parliament, Nabi Berri, insisted on the French president. Berri's insistence is, possibly due to the fact that the Americans can see through no eyes other than Israel's, where the French can be expected to see Lebanon through the eyes of at least some Lebanese. Okay, so, this, and ultimately, why were the Americans allowed? Because the only ones who can temper Israeli behavior are the Americans. Not that they ever do, but there are instances when the Americans have said, okay, enough already, and the Israelis have had to. They won't listen to the French, they won't listen to the British, they won't listen to God. Okay, so that's why the Americans are there, and that I understand that logic. But this was, a ceasefire. It was an opportunity for Hezbollah to also revamp its resources, its leadership, reorganize, resupply, because obviously it had taken a lot of hits, and the Israelis needed the ceasefire because they were taking unacceptable hits. For 2 months straight, they had not been able to go anywhere and had a lot of soldiers killed on their northern front. And of course, no residents still to this date able to return.
Yeah,
so
still
Israel
haven't
missed its
returned.
war goals, and it needed a ceasefire to rejig, the situation, which it may have done, but it may not have. We will
But
see at the end of 60 days, to be honest. Can this have given Hezbollah enough time? Because don't forget, right before the ceasefire, they did their largest attack ever. And people in Haifa were like, in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like this, all along that coast. So if you think Yemen is still standing because Yemen's lobbing missiles is easy. It's not hard. There are plenty of members of the resistance axis who still have that capabilities, but
Yeah.
we're waiting for many different transitional phases to pass through.
But you also have to remember that the Israeli army is in Man Hermon and is like across the east of Lebanon. I think the equation is completely different
Well,
come the end of the 60 days.
that may be where the next missile goes. I mean, what I'm saying is you can change a situation. All right. So I don't feel, I mean, I get this sweep of malaise that, people are feeling after Syria fell, even though it was not part of the 16-month war. Do you know what I mean? But actually, all parts of the resistance are still active, organized, weaponized, etc. Right? So one thing I have to say about the resistance, because it came out of sort of like guerrilla warfare mentality, is it's extremely flexible and nimble as opposed to conventional armies, right?
That's kind of what we're seeing in Gaza, right? Since you brought it up,
Yeah.
we shouldn't end this episode without talking about what's been happening there. As you say, yes, the resistance is still active, but obviously not in the same way, right? That we have seen it now over the past couple of weeks. What we have seen for the first time is the martyrdom operations, right? Suicide bombings that the resistance Qassam fighters, they go and they find, a gathering of Israeli soldiers, and well, they set off explosive vests. And I think it speaks, first of all, to the level of destruction and calamity that has been brought upon Gaza, and also to the to what you're saying, right? To all of a sudden we need to change our tactics. We no longer can ambush, or we no longer can launch rockets. Although rockets are still being lobbed, again, not to the same extent as we used to see, but still every so often you see some rockets flying out of Gaza towards Jerusalem, towards southern Tel Aviv.
5 yesterday that sent people into shelters, no?
Yeah. So it's been happening, right? And we know we've been hearing, in this is just not just from the resistance sources. This is even Israeli media outlets talking about how Hamas is rebuilding its forces by the thousands in Gaza, training and etc. Because of course, right now in Gaza, what you have more than anything is recruits, people that have absolutely nothing left to fight for, or not, I'm sorry, have absolutely nothing left but the fight, right? But the fight against the enemy. Because, we've been talking about this for a year. We're closing in 2024, and the crisis in Gaza has not improved by a centimeter, by a millimeter. It's just progressively gotten worse. Now we're talking about 80% of all the tents of the displaced have been destroyed because of the winter. No aid has been entering Gaza for weeks, months at this point. The bombing is just as relentless. We see the reports of by Israeli media about the atrocities that the army is committing. This about the 4-year-old baby, that story that made the rounds around the social media, about how these commanders are just killing children, infants with absolutely no regard. They talk about we need to kill them while they're young. We need to kill them like as if they are, rats or something. This is how the Israeli army is talking about Palestinians. You have Israeli soldiers who themselves say, we were the Nazis, and it was like they were the Jews. This is, a quote from an Israeli soldier that came out of Gaza. And we saw what happened at Kamal Adwan hospital over the weekend, right? The last functioning hospital in the north of Gaza set on fire. Hundreds of the remaining medical staff and patients made to walk south in their underwear at gunpoint, and the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital taken to the torture camp in the Negev, to the Sde Teiman torture camp, where it's very unlikely that he's going to emerge alive from this. And this is just normal, right? This is just kind of like the way it is. So now you have, with all of this calamity, the resistance is still fighting. So, when you look at Hezbollah, and when we're talking about what may happen in Lebanon, there is going to be still fighting, but that doesn't mean there won't be, a horrible calamity brought down upon the country as well.
Here's the thing, like, I don't, the resistance axis was always trying to stop the war, stop the bombardment of Gaza. That was their strategic goal, correct?
That was their demand.
And so that's how they acted throughout their conflict. Having seen what they're witnessing now necessitates, in my mind, a strategic shift from trying to de-escalate to trying to finish its opponent. Okay, and we've said this before, and I've tweeted it ad nauseum. To understand how vulnerable Israel is, the entire Zionist entity has only 6 power plants, 2 oil fields, 2 refineries, 1 oil terminal, and 3 gas fields. Half of its water is supplied by only 5 desalination plants. In its worst case scenario, Israel can be destroyed with 500 missiles. I mean, it just depends on its opponent.